You are built for this moment. I've said many times the gospel's made for times like these, but let me take it farther. You were made for times like these. You're built for this. And God's put us here for this moment. So all that I'm going to share with you kind of excites me in this sense because the church is drawn to involvement at a level it's never been at in my lifetime. And I say, well, it's about time. It's where we came from. It's who we are as a nation. And so let me just jump right in here because God works in amazing ways. Back in 1983, a fellow by the name of James Dobson thought it would be an excellent idea for there to be a bastion of biblical insight in our nation's capital. And so we began as a policy organization and a think tank, and we still are. Many of the things that I will share with you, some of the resources I will tell you about tonight, some of the websites that I will point you to, direct you to those resources that are real time. We've got great minds that are working very hard to speak biblically to current events in a real time manner. But then about 18 years ago, a man by the name of Tony Perkins came to serve as the president of the Family Research Council. Now, Tony was a pastor, a state legislator and a pastor, a Marine, a police officer, and he brought with him this heart for pastors. And one of the things that really exemplifies our vision for culture where life is valued, where families flourish and religious freedom thrives, is the Watchmen Pastors Network that began when Tony came. And it's around 16,000 pastors strong around America. Pastors who jumped in and said, we're going to pray and we're going to preach and we're going to partner, we're going to serve, we're going to make a difference. And they are, and they continue to do that. But here we are now. I used this slide last year. Now what? Well, it still fits because you look at where we are now. Now what? What do we do? Think of all that's happened in the last few years. And let me mention pastors quickly because here's a great pastor. Are there any other pastors here? Or ministers here? If you haven't pastored in the last 20 years, you haven't pastored. But if you haven't pastored since the pandemic started, you really haven't pastored. It's changed everything. And it's taken it to a new level of involvement. You're dealing with things you've never dealt with before. And so right now, perhaps the pastors of America, but let me go beyond that, the churches of America. This isn't just the pastors, but it's those in the pews, like you, who are getting involved, that are making a difference, that we want to not only celebrate and talk about, but add value to. And that's what I'm here to do tonight. So Isaiah 62:6 is the verse that we built ministry around. It's not just for the pastors. It's for the ecclesia. It's for those who are part of the body of Christ. I have posted watchmen on your walls, O Jerusalem. They will never be silent day or night. You call upon the name, call on the Lord. Give yourselves no rest. The calling of the watchman. Now, I've always loved Israel. I'd love to go to Israel. Been there a number of times. And my mind in this passage goes to that man or that older man, younger man who comes in after a long day's work or he gets up after a sleepless night, but he has a time that he's supposed to spend on the wall. It's his assignment. It's his schedule. And so he climbs up into the tower. He walks the catwalk or whatever it looks like in his town, but he has an area that he looks at. And let me tell you, that watchman, just like those sitting in this room tonight, think differently than others who just nonchalantly go throughout their day. Because you're thinking about what's going to happen. You're thinking about what can possibly happen to people you love. Let me tell you, that watchman did it right. He did a good job because he knew that there were people that he loved counting on him. It's like G.K. Chesterton said, a soldier does not fight because he hates what's in front of him, but because he loves those who are behind him. We love those. I have grandchildren, and everyone in this room, I think it kind of takes you to a new level when you're a grandparent. It does something to you. It really does. And you really, don't mess with a grandparent. Amen. I mean, we will charge hell with a water pistol for those little sweethearts any given day of the week. I used to make fun as a pastor. I'd make fun. I'm not going to drive 2 hours to watch a silly T-ball game. I'll drive 3. And you just do that because that's what you're thinking. And we in this moment, as watchmen on the wall, each of us as watchmen on the wall, I think are confronted with a few things that stand out to me. First, there's the watchman's reality. For that man that climbed that tower or walks that catwalk, it's that side of the village. He looks in a particular direction. He knows where the bushes are. He knows where the valleys are. He knows where the tree lines are. And if there's a clump of bushes there today that wasn't there yesterday, he knows he needs to say something because it's not right. And he's looking. He knows it like the back of his hand. It's his reality. And I think sometimes we get to the place where we forget what our reality actually looks like, what it is that we are living all around. I have set watchmen upon thy walls. God's entrusted you and me with the stewardship of this moment in history. Not another, but this one. I want you to live now, during the pandemic, during political upheaval, during economic uncertainty, during wars and I put you here for this moment. It's God's doing. I put you there. We have people who have worked very hard to fundamentally change the future of this country, and God's entrusted you and I with the ability to make a difference. So let me tell you where I got involved. Dad was a Goldwater Republican, and I understood politics as a young man at a level that I think not all my friends understood. I knew about economics and foreign policy. However, I got married, I got busy. I was in the corporate world for about 20 years before I began to pastor. And in 1996, I began to pastor a church. Fast forward to 2004, the state of Ohio. This is so appropriate to what's happening in Virginia right now. I think this story that I've told all over the country is more appropriate here and now than anywhere else I tell it. In 2004, Massachusetts legalized same-sex marriage. Now, it was a very toxic, it's still toxic to God, but it was something that when you said it out loud, it made people take notice and cringe. Politicians wouldn't touch it if it was going to hurt them in any way. Many leaders backed away from the topic because they were uncertain how it would affect them, and so they often said nothing or didn't get involved. In Ohio, there was one man. As I look around this room, I think of this story and I think of what one man can do. His name was Phil Burris. He was the president of the Family Policy Council in Ohio, Citizens for Community Values. And Phil said, we should do something about this. We should define marriage as between one man and one woman, just like the Bible says. And so we have a Republican governor, we have a Republican House and Senate, we got senators and congressmen that are Republicans, we got all kinds of help, but nobody would touch it. They didn't want to get involved. However, one man, Secretary of State by the name of Ken Blackwell, said, I'll help. And he helped us craft the language for the petitions. That's when I got involved. That's the first time I really got involved in something beyond the walls of the church. And so we helped get the petition signed. Over 560,000 names went on petitions, delivered them to the State House, to the Secretary of State. It went on the ballot as an issue, the marriage amendment it was called in Ohio in 2004. Now, what happened next was incredible. That's where I met David Barton. I mean, I knew David Barton when he was using the overheads, the little, that you use the little slides and you lay them out there on that was back when. And so David would go around the state, and we went around the state talking to pastors, talking to leaders, saying, speak to your folks. Tell them to register and to vote their biblical values. Take that in. It matters what you do. And the marriage, it's marriage. It's about marriage. It's a biblical thing. And so they did. We registered 40,000 Amish people to vote for the first time in their lives in 2004. Yeah. And this is what happened. This is what happened. No Republican has ever won the White House without Ohio. No Republican has become a president without Ohio. It's never happened. And no Republican has ever won the state of Ohio without winning 2 of the 3 major cities. You got to get Cleveland, Cuyahoga County, Franklin County, where Columbus is, Hamilton and Butler County, where Cincinnati are. You've got to get 2 out of the 3 cities, or you can't win the state. That's where the bodies are. It's where the votes are. In 2004, George W. Bush lost Cleveland. He lost Hamilton, Cincinnati. He lost Franklin, Columbus. He lost Toledo. He lost Dayton. But he won the state because evangelicals voted their values. Now hear me. For me, it was a moment of Amazing clarity. Do you mean to tell me, I thought, that Christians doing something shapes who the leader of the free world is? Shapes foreign policy throughout the Middle East and throughout Central America? You mean to tell me if Christians just do something, it matters? That's when it started. And I will tell you, I haven't shut up since. I have never been political. Hear me. Look right here at my baby blue eyes. I have never been political, but I have always been biblical. And the more I spoke biblically from the pulpit, do you know what happened to the churches I pastored? They grew. And people came and shook my hand and said, thank you for saying something. You mean the Bible speaks about economics? Absolutely. You mean the Bible speaks about government? Absolutely. Of course, marriage and of course issues of sexuality and other things. But you mean the Bible? Yes, it does. And so when you talk about these things, when you do it, you're going against, this is what we're doing, speaking to this. You're speaking to a culture, however, that is void of that. Because the more I talk about it, the more I realize a lot of folks don't know. I think we've got three major illiteracies in our culture today. One's biblical illiteracy. George Barna says that only 6% of Americans have a biblical worldview. Think about that for a minute. What's that say about the pulpits that are preaching to those individuals? 6% of Americans have a biblical worldview. We have biblical illiteracy. Secondly, I think we have historical illiteracy. We don't know our history. Of all states, this great state of Virginia, what history it has. We have civic illiteracy. Very few people know how government works. The greatest government on the face of the earth. You ought to know how it works. You ought to understand it a little bit because it's a great thing. We're blessed with it. It's the longest living government in the history of the world. It's a wonderful thing. But here's our reality for now. Here's where we are right now. And I think that's really what I want to begin with, because as George Barna, who, by the way, came to work for the Family Research Council. Barna is one of the most prolific pollsters in the history of America, especially in regard to church in America. And so he's found that worldview is a powerful thing. And what he really basically, you do what you believe. Everybody in the world does what they believe. I don't care who you are, you do what you believe. And worldviews matter because of what it affects. Now, I don't know if you can see all of this or not. Let me turn around a little bit. Because if you want to live like Jesus, you got to think like Jesus. You do what you believe. It's just who you are. It only works that way every time. So this is your worldview, and it really matters. Now, come on, boy, do your thing. Here you go. Worldview matters because people view pornography because of their worldview. That's your worldview. You support open borders because of your worldview. You embrace socialism because of a worldview. You support LGBTQ lifestyles because of worldview. You get married, divorced, on and on, abortion, you engage with church because of your worldview. Worldviews are formed between the ages of 15 to 18 months, and 13 years. That's when you get a worldview. Now, let me say that Walt Disney had this figured out. He knew how powerful movies were. He knew you could shape the minds of a generation with movies. Now, I'm not saying he was diabolical like some of the things that Disney does today, but it matters because in those ages, that's why they're targeted. That's why my grandchildren and your grandchildren are targets. It really matters. Now, here's what I want you to see. You form that worldview, you experiment with it, you establish that worldview. Then when you get a little older, you refine it and apply it to your life. And look at what happens when you get into your adult years. You become consistent at it, and you are a transmitter. You're shaping the lives of others, the worldviews of others. And then, according to Barna, the worldview you have at the age of 13, so you shape it between 2 and 13. For the most part, he says the worldview you have at the age of 13, you'll die with that worldview. You'll live the rest of your life with it. Unless something happens. Now, God changes worldviews all the time. Amen? He can do it. He can do it any service, anytime, anywhere. He's not limited in any way. What's fascinating to me is, and this is where I bring it back and lay it at the feet of the church, is that Barna asked thousands of people, what are the number one influences in culture today? And this is what he got from those results. It's some of the data right here. Look at the bottom of the third tier, the local church. Shaping culture. Where are we at in shaping culture? Well, bottom of the third tier. Then advertising, literature, theater, protest events, on and on. Go up to the middle tier, schools, print media, video games, peers, large corporations, affinity groups. Look at the top tier. This is astounding to me, and I argued this point, but I agree. Movies aren't just an event. They're not just something that happens in a theater. They build up. They have a production, and then the spin-offs, they go for, and the sequels go on and on and on, and they shape culture. They shape culture. Movies, number one, then television, then music, then books, then internet, then government, then the family. The problem with all of what I just said to you is this. Everybody in every church understands everything based on something.
Yes, that's right.
The Bible or that.
Yep.
That's our reality. That's our landscape. It came crashing home to me in 2019 in Columbus, Ohio, when I had a young man who, after I gave a speech, I wasn't debating, but I was presenting a biblical worldview of the transgender movement in education. There was a homosexual priest, so to speak, over here. He gave his perspective and I gave mine, and I talked a lot about worldview. And when I was done, there was a young man back here where that handsome guy in the blue and white coat is. He asked me a question. And his question was this: what would it take for you to change your worldview? I said nothing. I can think of nothing that would make me change my worldview. He said, well, what if your daughter came to you and said she was gay? Would you change your worldview? I said, no. Then he asked me the same question 3 more times. What if this? What if this? What if this? I said, no, no, no. Then he sat down. I mentioned this because he sat down so angrily that the chair shook, people turned and looked, and he was obviously very agitated. When the event was done, he made a beeline for me. And I thought, oh boy, I'm just a hayseed. I don't know. He's going to mop the floor with me. He was big enough. And he got right up to me, looked me right in the eye, and he said, I wasn't mad at you, which I was greatly relieved to hear. He said, I was mad because you have something that won't change. And it occurred to me, here's an 17-year-old boy, representative of millions of young people in America and millennials in America who've never known an absolute in their life.
That's right.
This is our reality.
Yes.
This is where we are. Don't get scared of this because, hear me, God put us here for now. He entrusted us with the stewardship of this moment, which leads me to the watchman's responsibility. What do we do? What should we do? What are we called to do? Which shall never hold their peace day or night, Isaiah said. You see, these folks knew that all they had to do was speak up, and there were those who would rally behind them. And I believe with all of my heart that if Christians, as Christians, speak up, as pastors are bold, as pastors are courageous, then that makes courageous believers and courageous churches and courageous communities. And that sets the tone for school board meetings. Have you ever seen so many school board meetings on YouTube in your life? Something's happening. See, I thought after 2019, I drove 24,000 miles in 9 states between June and November in 2019, or 2020. So I thought at the end of the year, 2020, I thought, man, I'm going to be in churches and there are going to be a lot of upset people and mad people. You know what I found around America? I found energized people. I found educated people. I found agitated people. And I found involved people like I have never seen in my life. Had an 84-year-old guy come up to me in Collier County, Florida, not long ago. He said, after we gave a speech and a presentation, he came up, he said, I want you to know something. Joe Biden can be president, I can run for school board. And he did. I gave him his first contribution right there on the spot. Go buy you some signs, brother, I'm behind you. This is like never before. Folks are getting aggravated. Yeah, that too. They're getting to where they understand this. Now, I got to hurry. I mentioned history a moment ago because I love this story, and I'll quickly go through it. If you're going to go see David Barton tomorrow night, which all of you should, he is a national treasure. Most of this I learned from him and others, but what happened over there in Williamsburg in 1774 was profound. Now just picture the moment. Here are the leaders of the House of Burgess over there hearing about the Boston Port Act, and they're saying, we got to do something. And the first thing that they did was called for a resolution asking for a day of prayer and fasting. They're going to do no business. They're just going to pray and fast for a whole day. And the king's appointed governor, Lord Dunmore, walks in, waving the resolution, castigating them for doing that and not asking him for help. It's kind of a silly thing when he said out loud. And he fired them all. He said, you go home. Just go home. And there was this tall guy in the back from Fairfax, Washington was his name. He said, folks, follow me. And they got up. They walked out the back door, down to Raleigh Tavern. Now, I'm in a church. I should have said the Holiday Inn, cleaned it up. But it was a tavern. And it was a place where they gathered. That's what it was. And so at Raleigh Tavern, they repassed the resolution calling for a day of prayer and fasting, which they did. Washington wrote in his diary, they did it. And then they said, let's ask some other colonies if they want to come together and discuss uniting as countries or states. Other colonies had talked about it, but Virginia kind of pushed the button. Thanks, guys, for that. We appreciate that. And so they met in Philadelphia, Carpenter's Hall, a few doors down from Independence Hall. And before they did anything else, they asked Reverend Duché to come in, and he read Psalm 35, and he prayed such an eloquent prayer. John Adams wrote to Abigail and said, it made the Quakers weep. And that's a powerful prayer when you make the Quakers weep. And that's what happened. And they did, and they prayed, and they asked God to guide them, and God began to guide them. And then you guys again over there in Richmond call for this. Peyton Randolph sends out the ask for all the folks to come, and that's where Peter Gabriel Muhlenberg showed up for the first time, heard Patrick Henry give this impassioned speech. And by the way, if you've never heard this guy do Peter Gabriel Muhlenberg, you should do that. You should have him here to do that. He does an incredible job talking about this pastor who heard that speech, went back to his church in Woodstock, and he's preaching to his people. And he gets in January of 1776, takes off his clerical robe, and he's got his Continental officer's uniform on underneath. It's a great story as he speaks to his people. But what he said to them is really something that can be said to us today. He said, "You are placed by providence in a post of honor because it's the post of danger." The eyes of not only North America, but the whole British Empire, all of Europe are upon you. Let us therefore be altogether solicitous that no disorderly behavior, nothing unbecoming our characters as Americans, notice he said Americans, and citizens and Christians be justly chargeable to us. The whole world's watching, he's saying. We got to get this right. I will tell you the whole world's watching still. In 2014, I stood on Temple Mount during a siege from Gaza. They were lobbing the rockets in, and I saw the Iron Dome work. It's one of the scariest things you ever see in your life. It's terrifying, but it works. God bless Israel. And so we were there. There were no tour buses. If you've been to Israel during anything like that, you've seen it, but there were no tour buses. There were just vans, little vans, and a few people here and there. We were the only ones on Temple Mount this particular day. There were no other groups we could see. And there was this little entourage that came up to us, and they were passing by, and they started introducing themselves. And I was with some congressional leaders. I was a token pastor on this trip, and they all introduced themselves. I was at the end of the line. And so the guy that was shaking hands with everybody was the Minister of Tourism for Israel. His name was Uzi Landau at the time. And he gets down to me, and he says, "Well, what do you do?" And I said, "I'm a pastor in the Midwest." He said, "Oh, the church. You pastor a church." I said, "Yes." He said, "Do you know, we know." Now, here's a member of the Israeli cabinet said, "We know that if the church in America is good and strong, then America will be good and strong." And then he said this, "We know that if America is good and strong, then Israel will be blessed." The world is still watching. We've got a reality, but hear me now. Everyone in this room has a responsibility. I've served a career. I've done this and I've done that. Every one of us has a moment before us like never before to get involved, to do things, to speak out, to speak boldly about what we can do. Because the Watchman had a reaction lastly. He had something he had to do. He had to respond. If he didn't respond, innocent people died. And if we don't respond today, then there are innocent lives at stake. Hear me, there are. So we ask pastors all around the country to speak biblically to issues we have at frc.org. Let me start telling you a little bit about what we offer and why I serve this great organization. Because I believe we have the greatest arsenal of tools to speak biblically to culture in the nation today. I think we have what I like to call a real-time factory. If you go to frc.org, you will find a feed. So what's happening today, we're speaking biblically to it. Some of our team in D.C., they're writing op-eds, they're writing white papers, they're posting, they're interacting, they're being interviewed by other organizations. I saw our Executive Vice President just this afternoon on Neil Cavuto, Lieutenant General Jerry Boykin, talking about the Middle East. We are daily speaking biblically to everything that's happening in culture today. And it's available for every single person to go to. frc.org, check it out, or the app, Stand Firm app. It's a resource. I tell pastors, if something happens on Thursday and you want to talk about it Sunday from a biblical perspective, look at what we've written and quote us. We strive to be a quotable source. We work hard. Everything that we print, if you look at it out there in the lobby, it's duly footnoted. We've worked very hard for you to trust us and quote us. So we are a real-time source. We want to be available to you in every regard on what's happening. I mentioned the app, the Stand Firm app. The pastors that have joined us to pray, to preach, and to partner, a lot of them have done that, and many of them haven't done that. And we've worked hard to provide them no excuses for not doing that. And somebody said, well, why don't a pastor do this? Well, I think there's fear sometimes. Now, let me qualify that, because somebody says, yeah, there's fear. They're scared of people getting mad and this. Yeah, they are. But I think there's another fear out there, and that's the fear of not knowing what to say. Because if you don't know what to say, you're not going to say anything. And silence is often seen as an endorsement. We want to take that away. We want to provide the resources for you and everybody, not just pastors, but leaders in churches, to speak biblically to every cultural issue. We want to be the source for you to go to, and each and every time you have something come up, we want to help you do that. So the community impact team model, I want to stop there for a minute. That's really where my sweet spot is. We built this a number of years ago, and there goes it's a good phone. It'll be all right. It's a Mac. And the community impact team is a structure for churches to use. Somebody said, well, what about Chad's Faith Win groups, or what about the city elders groups? Which one? Yes, do them all. They marry themselves together. We work together in harmony. What we have adds value to them. What they do adds value to us. And again, go to that event tomorrow night with David Barton and Chad Conley and handsome guy over here. I call Peter Gabriel Muhlenberg. This is important for us to work together. This model is built for churches to employ. You find a team, you find leaders, and it's built to inform the congregation. We have the resources real time to do that. We have print resources to do that. And there are a lot of pastors. I got a good buddy in Ohio who's taken the worldview materials that we have created. We have a Center for Biblical Worldview at FRC, and George Barna is a part of that team. And we've created a number of pieces that are, it's a worldview series. What the Bible has to say about human sexuality, about religious freedom, about political involvement, on and on and on. They're available there. They're great tools. I got a buddy in Ohio, he has a Worldview Wednesday event. So every Wednesday night, he's teaching worldview to his children and his teens and his young adults. And let me tell you how he started, Pastor. This is the coolest story. He said, I wanted to do this. He said, but really for me, I thought, who's going to benefit the most? The parents are going to benefit the most. He said, I called a meeting with all my parents, and I got them in. Just like if you were starting a Christian school, you've got one here. This is all good stuff, and many homeschoolers and Christian schoolers were a part of that group. And he said, this is what I want to do on Wednesday nights. And they said, it's the best idea we've heard in a long time. Let's do it, and we'll run it. And so he's not even having to lift a finger. His parents in his church are leading the event called Worldview Wednesday. So every week he's teaching worldview to his adults, senior adults, and kids and teenagers. So Inform is one of the tools that it brings. Equipping the church to speak biblically to cultural issues. Again, if you don't know what to say, often you won't, and that's not just with pastors from the pulpit. That's with somebody on the job, or a nurse in a hospital, or a teacher in a school, or the list goes on, a student, so forth and so on. We want to equip people with a biblical worldview perspective on every cultural issue. Also, to alert. By the way, you're having an election here in Virginia. There are alerts everywhere here. I'm going to pause here in the program to talk about something that's happening in Virginia that's never happened before, and that's prompted the Family Research Council and other organizations to spend an inordinate amount of time here in this state because of that. Again, if the church can make the difference. The church does something, it makes a difference. It really does. And the church can do much more than it is. Urgent Virginia Election Strategy Briefing is a process document we have produced because in Virginia now you can harvest ballots. Now, this document that I have here is built for pastors or organizational leaders. And I say, when I talk about a community impact team, you may think, well, this is something a church can do. I've got folks, I've got Republican parties in different states that have a community impact team. They're leading it. I've got Patriot groups and 912 groups and Tea Party groups that have, they're different people from different churches, but they have a community impact team. I got a guy in Colorado right now that's got this big team that they're doing cultural issues, and he said, can I use your name and material? Give me your address, I'll send it to you tomorrow. Yes, sir, you can use our stuff. That's what we're here for. Well, this is a tool that was created just for you, and it is an alert. And a Virginia law was updated, and you can read exactly what happened. We talk about gathering ballots being legal in the state. Preparation, by the way, just like America started, we suggest you pray first. Before you do anything else. Know the dates, and so we've got every important date listed here, which matters. There are certain things you can't do after a certain date, so you got to know when you can, and you can do it. Registering to vote and getting these things in. The process, it's very simple. You can download an absentee ballot. They've got them out in the lobby right now. And this is where you say, well, I'm registered. Okay, I'm done. Absolutely not. I would imagine just this little group right here knows 100, 200 people that aren't registered to vote. You may not know they're not registered to vote, or they're not going to vote, or they can't get to vote, or they're scared to get out and vote because of COVID, or whatever the reason is. This is where you play a key role, because you can, and I've had this at Chino Hills in California. They just collected in the governor's recall election over 25,000 ballots, just that church. Because they went to their nursing homes, they went to the places where people were, and they helped them understand what was going on, and the process is all lined out here, how to build a team, how to gather a day to set up the absentee ballots and gather the ballots, and how to deliver them to the registrar, and on and on and on. This is all spelled out. And this is, if there's ever a moment, in fact, as I go around and talk about Virginia, and I have because folks ask me where I'm going, I said, do you know something's about to happen in Virginia that nobody thought could happen? Amen? Yes. And you can play a key role, just like in 2004 in Ohio. You say, there's Richmond, there's Fairfax, there's LA. What's it matter what we do? Hear me now, brothers and sisters. This is a day to do something. Because all you've got to do is bump up turnout in rural Virginia at about 5% or so, and you guys nullify the sweet, bless their heart folks over there in those other places. It matters. The real Virginians are going to get a vote. And so you can play a key role. And this is where a community impact team or any group, I don't care what you call yourself, can alert the congregation. They can do it with other things as well. Let me hurry along because I want to get to some Q&A. Mobilizing, and that's putting the boots on the ground. That's getting them out there. That's working the polls. We had to repopulate the polls in Ohio last year. Everyone was afraid to, all of our poll workers, had 36,000 poll workers in Ohio, and many of them were elderly, and they were afraid to get out. So we tasked the churches of Ohio, where I live, with finding, you got the poll workers in your, and they don't mind getting out. They're already out working anyway. Let's repopulate the poll workers of the state with the church members of the state. And so we began a process of doing that, and we did it with great success. Wherever it is that we can serve as Christians, we need to serve. Amen. I don't care if it is at a local level. As a pastor, I would infiltrate, take over the county central committees. I'm telling you what I did. I did it twice. Our church kind of took over Central Committee, and I said, when we go to the meeting, I said, don't look at me. Don't even talk to me. We don't know each other. And so, but we did. And then we worked on getting folks elected to city council and other things. It's happening all over America. You can play a key role. That's where you get mobilized. And you know what happens at the same time? Here's a sweet byproduct for you. You're teaching civics to another generation of people who don't even understand how government works. It's a great opportunity to do that. It's very simple. You form a team. You communicate with the congregation and the pastor. You have somebody that's good at that. You participate. You get folks involved that have never been involved before, and then you begin to influence your county. And because all politics is local, Nehemiah build your part of the wall, and then somebody else build their part of the wall. But you take care of where you are right now, and it changes the face of culture. I don't care what you do it or how you do it. Just do it. Be that. The Watchman has a reality. This is where we are. The Watchman has a responsibility. We've been handed this freedom at great cost. And we have a reaction. And we're here to help you do it. The Center for Biblical Worldview, there's a little card on the table. You can, with your QR code, you can access that. See all the work that we're doing for parents and grandparents. As a grandparent, did I tell you I was a grandparent? I may have pictures before this is over. That's my role. I mean, along with stuffing sugar in those sweet little darlings, I am stuffing history, and I'm pouring into them a biblical worldview with everything I've got. So here are the tools to do it. Help the parents do it if they're not already doing it. It's a great way to teach, and so check out that. Sage Cons, I want to mention that quickly because that is a demographic that George Barna, in essence, pulled out of the electorate and helped us understand who these people are. Now, SageCon, the word SageCon stands for Spiritually Active, Governance Engaged Conservatives. And I see that's too small for where I am, so I want to read a lot of this to you. They're about 9% of the population, 20 million adults. These are physical, social, governance conservatives. They're mostly born-again Christians. They attend church. They read the Bible. They apply it to their lives. They have a biblical worldview, if you will. They're active in church ministries. They're politically active, and they are attentive. And they're registered to vote, and they're a frequent voter. You can't win with just them, but you can't win without them. And this is a key point. And this is why our conversation tonight is so very important. What we at the Family Research Council have endeavored to do, and some of the shifting we've done in the last year in our ministry, is to dial in on how we can create new Sage Cons. We're looking at those who are pre-Sage Cons, we're calling them. These are those who are growing up and they're beginning to learn and they're getting interested. How do we share a biblical worldview with them? Because as we do, they're going to see things politically and economically and whatever in a certain light. And so we are working very hard with the CIT programs around the country and the Center for Biblical Worldview and other real things we're dialing in on that we want to make sure that it goes to a different level of involvement. Because I'm getting older. I got about 20 years, 25 years, if God tarries His coming, and I'm giving it all for my grandkids. I'll do it. So will you? But we've got to raise up a new generation to carry the torch. And we've got to think generationally along these lines. We've got tools, how to respond to the LGBT movement. It's a great pamphlet. It's out there on the table. Parents' Guide to the Transgender Movement in Education, perhaps the most sought-after piece that we have. It's got the explanation of how the gender unicorn is used to speak to precious little innocent, pure minds, to shape their worldview on sexuality. And so that's out there as well. You need to get a copy of that. Religious principles for religious liberty, biblical principles for religious liberty. Best pro-life arguments for a secular culture. You say, well, everybody knows. Not really. There are millions of Americans that don't understand this issue at all. So we're going to help you to speak to that. Bible's teaching on marriage and family. I'm going to keep my left arm down. Let's see what else we've got out there. Biblical principles for political, pro-life, and human sexuality. Maybe one of the most important pieces we've got. So I've got some of those out there on the table. You're welcome to take anything that I have. It's there for you. We want to add value to your work and all that you're doing. If you want to teach history, let me suggest the 1776 Commission Report. President Donald Trump asked a number of people, Dr. Larry Arnn, president of Hillsdale College, Carol Swain, David Barton, and Bob McEwen, other dear friends of ours, to really give us a picture of American history in a very concise way. And so they did. It's about 69 pages long if you want to download it. It was available at the White House website until January the 20th. For some reason, it just disappeared. But Hillsdale has it, and Heritage has it, and College of the Ozarks has it, and other great organizations have it. However, I mentioned that, and I mentioned Hillsdale because they now have classes you can go to Hillsdale right now and take. And they're building a landing page for pastors. Larry Arnn and I had lunch about a month ago, and they're building a landing page for pastors, so pastors can go there and find this curriculum. There's curriculum to teach American history in direct opposition to this knuckleheaded 1619 project junk that's out there. So if you want to teach history, that's a great tool. Joseph Warren was a patriot from Massachusetts, president of the Congress in Massachusetts. He was a great leader. He was a great influence, and the town loved him. In fact, on the anniversary of the Boston Tea Party in occupied Boston, they had a party, and they had a celebration. These are Americans. I love Americans. Somebody said, "Are you a Republican or a Democrat?" No, I'm an American. That's what I am. I'm an American. These Americans had a celebration, and they hired this guy to be the keynote speaker. Now, everybody knew him, and I wouldn't have known him if it weren't for Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan quoted him in his first inaugural address. So here's Dr. Joseph Warren, who, by the way, never saw the end of the revolution. He died at Bunker Hill. This is what he saw, and this is what he said on that day. Our country is in danger, but not to be despaired of. On you depend the fortunes of America. You are to decide the important question upon which rests the happiness and the liberty of millions yet unborn. Act worthy of yourselves. What a challenge. What a challenge. My granddaughter was 6 when I accepted the role as Midwest Director for the Family Research Council. Her name's Kyrie, and no, I don't have any pictures. I do have on my phone, if it still works, and you can see them. She came up to me and she said, "Papa, all she's known is me being pastor." So I wasn't going to be sitting on the going up to speak on Sundays and be on the platform. And so she says, "Papa, what are you going to do?" I said, "Well, honey, I work for a family policy organization in Washington, D.C." No, I didn't say that. She's 6. She's 6. But I did say something to the effect, very quickly, I was saying the wrong thing because her eyes just glazed over and she was looking up. And finally I said, "Honey, I'm just trying to save America for you." And she said, "Okay." Just trotted off. She was fine. Well, she went to school that next week, and her teacher was a former student from the first church that I pastored that was in a youth program. Was her teacher. And she said, "Kyrie," she said, "I heard your grandpa retired." She said, "Nope, he's saving America." Now, she's come up to me Sundays. That's where they come over on Sundays, and we have the afternoon together, and she's asking me many times, "Where are you going this week, Papa?" "I'm going to Wyoming," or "I'm going to Nevada," wherever I'm going. So we'll get a map, and I'll talk about it. And I do a video for them every day, so I do it from wherever I am. And so I'll tell her where I'm going. We'll discuss it. And more than 10, 20 times, she said to me, "Are you going to save America for me?" Oh, what do you think? Like I said earlier, I'll charge hell with a water pistol for that little girl. One of my mentors said years ago, "The world at its worst needs the church at its best." The fruit of our lives grows on the trees of others. Never forget that. And so that little girl, she's your granddaughter. She's everybody's granddaughter. The children that are looking for you and I to do the right thing right now. And it may be a little tough. It may be a little uncomfortable. But you know, when you're prepared and you're called, it's not that bad. So I don't know what God's got in store for you to do in the next few days. But there are many people counting on you to do as much as you possibly can to get people registered, to get those votes counted, to get those votes in a timely manner, to work with your pastor, to work with every organization, to work with my dear brother on the front seat, Brother Huddleston. Listen, he's a force to be reckoned with now. Brad and his wife are champions. So whatever they're doing, help them do it. And do it yourself. Because it matters. It matters. Thank you for your time. All right. I do. So, ask me a question, any question, and I'll... Okay, you got one? Oh, the mic's ready. Man, Phil Donahue's here. He's going to slide right down the aisle to you. I'm not old. I'm just beat up. I was telling Brad, he called me this week, and we had I've never had a calf come this late. I raise black Angus cattle, and I bought a Angus Simmental cross, and it was bred, I was told, and I thought the calf would be here a lot earlier. But I had a calf the other day, so I've been wrestling that mom around. She's had a little trouble, and so I'm stiff as a board. So if I haven't taken any Tylenol yet because I'm going to fall asleep on you. Questions? Anything? Come on. Remarks? Disagreements? Arguments? Yes, sir.
Mine's not so much as a question, or maybe a request. Is could you speak to the fact of, to one, why isn't this room packed with like-minded people? Why are other pastors hesitant to share this message in other churches? I mean, you drive through the city of Stanton, you can't drive a city block without seeing a church, right? Lots and lots and lots of churches here. And what's the holdup?
Well, you know, this didn't happen overnight, and if you study the life of Antonio Gramsci and understand how cultural hegemony has infiltrated our culture with a dumbing down, if you will, of our values and on and on. That's not an excuse. Those who have opposed what we hold dear have been at work a lot longer than we have. We have been issues driven, which is not bad. We run to the fire, and we should. They've been infrastructure driven. And they played a long game long before we. So what we have is the landscape. That's why when I talk about a reality, I painted it as this is where we are culturally. You're dealing with a lot of people who don't know how government, they don't even know how important it is to be here. And they never will until it affects them personally. So we can't fix that unless their situation changes, and it will if things continue as it is. But the good news is this, because look, I was called to preach back in 1984, and I remember how I was going to save the world and how disappointed I was when somebody didn't get saved every time I preached and the church didn't grow and on and on. But I learned over the years that, you know, God's got a hand in this. God had a hand in our founding. And God must have a hand in our restoration. It won't work any other way. And the good news, this is where I get blessed and happy, because even with a handful of folks, and you're a good group, you really are. I've talked to Les on a Tuesday night. You're a good group. But I will tell you this, God only needs a handful of folks. The right people in the right place, a remnant. That's how God does His best work. Because so you can get discouraged, fine. Get discouraged and get over it, because there's plenty to do. We've got to stay focused. We've got to stay motivated and committed. But remember, God's hand was upon this country in such a way that He took a handful of people during the Revolution, a small percentage of people, and changed the world. He did it with 12 in Israel. He can take a handful of us. He can change the state of Virginia with your influence in this room if we'll let Him. And so I'm calling these pastors and leaders and people, the ecclesia, folks like you, I'm asking you, for the sake of my grandkids and yours, let's do it all we can. And we can't get discouraged. As I said earlier, if I had the answer for the pastors, I could probably write a book and sell 1 million copies, but some of them are afraid, some of them are lethargic, there's apathy. That's kind of how we got here. We were dumbed down, then we got apathetic, and now here we are. But I don't care. Here we are. So let's do something. Do the right thing, and that's what Americans do.
Amen.
Any other observations, questions, comments? Oh, come on. Here you go.
Registering
Phil?
voters for the first time this year. And
You
some
go,
of
girl.
the comments that I'm getting from people that are registered, but they're fed up.
Yep.
They don't think their vote matters. They don't think anything they say or do is going to make a difference. They're registered, but they're not going to vote because they just don't care anymore.
Yeah.
What can we do to change their mind and
Well,
get
that's sure the
them
game.
back on board?
That was sure the game plan of those who caused the doubt regarding the 2020 election, was to disenfranchise and disillusion potential voters. What we've got to do is tell them it does. And you can promise them this: you don't vote, you know the outcome. If you do vote, we can question that later. But for the sake of all that is America and the future of America, cast your vote. You got the freedom to do that. There are people in this world that have not that freedom, have never known that freedom. They've never tasted that freedom. Of the freedom that the United States has experienced in our lifetime. You think about the history of the world from Adam till now. Less than 1% of everyone that's ever lived has experienced what we've experienced in America. Less than 1% have experienced this freedom. So we've got to do what we can. I was in Florida, in Leesburg, and I met an American who migrated here from Cuba, and he was crying. He said, man, he said, I was so distraught when I got here. He said, I felt like quitting. I felt like giving up. He said, then I heard what you guys are doing. I said, you know what? I got some hope. We can change this thing. You can't here, can't do it in Venezuela. You can't do it in Peru, but you can do it here. We're here in America. So I would say to that person, you're in America. Don't overlook the freedom and the ability to do that. I don't care how disgruntled you get, you can do it here. You can vote here. And it matters. I believe it still matters. Right now, there are 161 election integrity bills in 47 states right now. Some are passing, some will never pass because of the makeup of the legislature and the executive branch. However, right now in America, for the most part, it's never been like this before. Things are getting fixed that have never been fixed before. And so, is there going to be corruption? There's always been corruption. There was corruption at the beginning. It's people. For some reason, it's like God chose to make His church out of people of all things. Well, the people run the country. But it was built for moral people. And encourage them. Just encourage them. So I believe it matters. And if that doesn't work, pull the grandparent card. Works every time. There you go, girl.
Tim,
Yes.
can I respond to that?
Yes.
Oh, certainly, thank you.
Just to help you out with that, there are thousands of individuals across the state of Virginia that have been trained to be poll watchers and poll workers. For the first time, we have been training organizations all across this state have been training individuals to watch and manage the polls on the eastern side of 95, which is Northern Virginia, Richmond, and Tidewater. There's also been individuals that have been going to the registrar's office and challenging them to follow the law. And we're beginning to get some of those things recorded, audioed and videoed for prosecution if necessary. So there are some individuals that have been after this since probably about December the 1st of last year. So please be encouraged that there are individuals on the ground that are rolling up their sleeves and saying, we're going to fight for this state, and we're going to do everything that we can to make sure that if you cheat, you have got to do it in front of us, because we know now how you are cheating, and we're seeing that happen. How many of you have received absentee ballots from organizations already? They're sending them out all over the place. And what's the purpose? Multitudes, it's to cheat. And so where we are is we're stuck with the
the reality of the laws, and we have to stay within the laws, but we take full advantage of the laws. It's time for us to be wise as serpents and as harmless as doves. And so it's time to roll up the sleeves and get bullying. So many people are doing that you probably don't know, and that's a good thing.
I know one thing that's helped me with convincing people that have that same mindset is showing statistics. Northern Virginia Tidewater, 80-some% registered voters showing up. Go to rural Virginia, you got, although I think one county was like 78% registered voters, only 37% showed up. Start showing statistics and be like, people show up, your vote counts. If you don't show up, your vote doesn't count. And so when you start showing statistics, like I tell them, I was like, you can lie, I can lie, numbers don't lie. So if you start showing statistics to them where they can see, that helps convince them to change their mind. So that's another thing you can get, go to election websites and pull off the pie graphs and charts showing them numbers. And so when you go talk to people and be like, here's the statistics if you want to see it. And that there has helped me convince a lot of people to get registered and go vote. So.
On the right-hand side of the screen. So I asked the worker, I said, what does that mean? And she said, that's 239 votes. And I said, oh, so 239 people have come thus far. She said, no, each ballot is, each little dot counts as a vote. So in 11 days, only 239 divided by 7 people have been to vote in the city of Waynesboro, and that was shocking.
Yeah.
That was terrible.
My boss has a phrase. He says, bad politicians are elected by good people who don't vote.
Yes, that's right. That's one of the best arguments.
Anybody else?
One other thing to your point about the people who don't want to vote, we worked at Dominion Outdoors 2 Saturdays ago, Jason Wells and I did. And we encountered quite a few people that were just completely disgusted with the vote, with the election. And 3 of these people said, I will never vote again. And I started telling them, well, so you've given up. So you're one of them now. And that'll ruffle some feathers. And I said, you're just going to let them win the game, just walk off the field? Are you willing to fight? Or are you just going to roll over and say, okay, have your way, do what you want? And some of them get angry, but that's okay. Because all 3 of those, I think, heard and will go vote. I believe they will. So I guess everybody's a little different, in how you approach them, but that sure worked at Dominion Outdoors that day.
We've been here before. There were moments where it was almost lost. If you want to look at 1863 in Gettysburg, or you want to look in at 1860, the election of 1860, there were moments where this was just about over, but God has blessed this land. I heard it said. Now you can theologically challenge me all you like. I'm quoting somebody else, so you can challenge them. If this little 4% of the world's population where we live, this 4% of the world's population, the United States of America, the longest lasting government in the history of the world, who has given more money, resources, lives, blood, 85 cents of every dollar comes from America that goes to missions in the world. There are more inventions, more blessings. Nobody else has given more lives for the freedom of others. No other nation has given more money to rebuild nations after wars than the United States of America. On and on the list goes. If God's done with America, He may be done with the world. That's right. Yes. And that's God's business. But I don't think He's done with America. I just don't think He's done. And I'm living like I don't think He's done. Because He's blessed this land, and He can still bless this land. If we weren't built this way, we couldn't survive storms like this. But thank God, God gave wisdom to some wonderful men to make right decisions. And it was I think the founders used the phrase, the finger of God, in regard to our founding documents. So we're blessed. Well, guys, thank you. Thank you for being here. Thanks for what you do. Thank you for the difference you're going to make in the life of my grandchildren. God bless you. Thanks. Have a great evening.
Amen. Wasn't that good? Yes, and we appreciate you coming. And what we will do, the offering boxes are out there. We encourage you. Just make it out to VWC. We'll do one check for the Family Research Council and so forth. They are, and I'll give you this, they are the best source of information in the country. I don't know about the whole world, so I'm just staying to a little bit of what I know. But I think they're the best in the world. But they have all kinds of resources that are available for all different kinds of issues. And again, I'm very simple. If you don't put light into a room, you have darkness. If we do not put light, the word, into government, we will have more of what we've already got, of the bad stuff. It's up to us, and y'all, a couple of y'all heard this morning, and Liz, I was out of town last week, and great conference that I was at, and I was telling Liz last night, and very similar to some of the things that you said. I told her, I said, we don't have grandchildren right now, but I want to, and I look forward to the day that happens. It's not today. I'm fine that we don't have any today. But I said, I cannot, in good conscience, sit back and do nothing and leave this world to just whatever for our grandkids. And this morning I quoted in Bible study Acts 20:29, where Paul, in his farewell address to the church at Ephesus, the leaders of the church of Ephesus, he told them, he said, I know after my departure that savage wolves will come. I told our staff in a staff meeting a couple months ago, I said, the state that we are in right now, there are savage wolves out there. And I said, I cannot leave the flock or the children of the flock or the grandchildren of the flock open prey to the savage wolves. We have no option. I will say one last thing in Jesus' name. I pray. Y'all better pray that I'm not lying. But I shared some of this morning. In Egypt, there was getting ready to be a change, a shift spiritually. They were moving from patriarchs to a nation. They were moving from being slaves in Egypt to being their own nation. Those in the power structures that were present when God began to move to make that change, those at the top of those power structures doubled down on maintaining those structures. Pharaoh hardened his heart. Make the bricks without straw. If he'd had any sense, he'd have quit after 2 plagues. But he doubled down because he realized that what was getting ready to happen was going to change everything. I present to you for your consideration. As Tim said, everybody in the world knows that something's up right now. There is a change, there's a shift taking place. And those in the current power structures are doubling down to maintain their power. They are all in. They are. We've got to be all in. We've got to be all in. If they're all in, we're all in, then it comes down to the difference in the size of our gods. I think we will be fine. Amen. Well, again, also you can give on the app. Just pick guest speaker, and we, like I said, we'll make sure we get all that. Be sure and stop by the table. The resources are great. Let's again give Tim a hand for coming, and thank you. Amen. God bless you. You're dismissed. Oh, no, you're good. You're good. No, I'll tell you. We have been asked for our church to be used October the 24th. I know I have been told that Winsome Sears, the candidate for Attorney General, will be here.